Dealio guys, and welcome back to another episode of Infinite Magicraid. In today's video we have our baby girl Melina, so let's go ahead and get right into it here. So Melina of course is a legendary, and she's a very cool looking baby girl here. She's also a supporter, and she's coming in hot with that green mark action. So is she going to be useful or not? Well, hopefully in this video we can kind of deduce that together. So starting off with her basic attack here called Sword Sprint, she deals 108% attack damage to a single enemy and restores HP for self and the ally with the lowest HP by 25% of the damage dealt by this attack. I already like the sound of that, and with this skill fully booked up, it does bring that damage up to 260% attack damage, which is on the lower end, especially as a legendary, but considering the added effect, it kind of makes sense here, because if this was like super high and she's healing based on 25% of that, that could be a very big issue. So I'm curious to see how this performs, because obviously having more attack on her means that this is more beneficial. But as always, with this being a basic attack, she's going to be using it, but it shouldn't be something that you rely on whatsoever, because obviously she has other skills here. So coming in with her second skill called Sword Blast Guardian. That's a very big mouthful. It does have a 6-turn cooldown unbooked, but what this skill does is it grants resistance debuff to all allies for 1 turn, and then it also brings up consolidation 1 to all allies for 2 turns. So resist debuff means obviously there's resistance towards debuffs for your entire squad here, and consolidation 1 means that allies do take, I believe it's 10 or 20% less damage. 20% less damage taken, regardless if they have a shield up or not. So with her being a supporter here, this is one of those skills that you want to get off probably towards the beginning of the match, because especially in cases in PvP where you're fighting like Margarita, for example, or Dario, maybe Carry, etc., or even high burst damage dealing targets like Sia or Yoko, you want to make sure that you can kind of mitigate that damage as much as possible, and reducing debuffs just in general kind of keep your party healthy and alive, because they don't have lowered attack, they don't have lower speed, lower defense, etc. here. So with this fully booked up though, it does go down to 4 turns, which for what it gives, it's pretty chunky, so I can understand the penalty with that move. Moving on to her passive skill though, called Night Strength. It increases Melina's direct damage dealt by 6% for every 1 type of attribute debuff she has, up to 5 times. Yeah, so 5 times 6, that's 30%, and then it also reduces the target's turn meter by 5% for every 1 type of attribute buff she removed from the target. Is this passive saying that it's taking away the target's attribute buff at the same time, or what? I feel like the wording on this is very weird, so you guys feel free to let me know in the comments below if that makes any sense to you, but that doesn't really sound correct, because increase Melina's direct damage dealt by 6% for every 1 type of attribute buff she has, up to 5 times. And with that fully booked up though, that does get increased from 30% to a whopping 50% if the math checks out, and then it reduces the target's turn meter by 5% for every 1 type of attribute buff she removed from the target. We'll have to definitely check in on that. But moving on to her ultimate called Hexagram Array, this has a 5-turn cooldown unbooked, and it removes all attribute buffs from the enemies. If you don't know what attribute buffs are, that means attack up, there's defense up, there's speed up. I think there's also like maybe the whole resistance thing as well, maybe, don't quote me on it, but stuff like that where it affects your attributes, or basically the stats of your character. But anyways, afterwards it deals 100% attack damage to all enemies and restores all allies HP by 10% of the damage dealt by this attack, and this skill also deals 10% more damage, up to 50% extra damage for every 1 type of attribute buff removed. So maybe this is where that passive kind of synergizes in with this, to where you really don't get the meat of that passive until you end up busting out that Hexagram Array. And with this skill fully upgraded though, it does receive a 60% damage increase, bringing the minimum up from 100 to 160%. And also, if you take in mind the added effect of attribute buffs, which is up to 50%, it brings this AoE up from 160% upwards to 210% if they have all 5 of those attribute buffs up there. And then the skill also gets reduced down to 4 turns in itself. So interesting. So it seems to me like in order to get the most bang for your buck out of her, you kind of want to wait until the squad gets their attribute buffs up so you can kind of punish them afterwards, and not only that, but also kind of help reduce their turn meter by making them slower, because if they have 5 buffs up and she removes those 5 buffs, you get that 50% increase in the damage for your AoE, which heals your squad even more. And also, they're going to be receiving a 25% turn meter penalty because of her Knight Strength passive. So very interesting. This definitely seems like more so of a unit that you may want to use manually, or can kind of construct her skills to make sure that it's kind of delayed with her ultimate, just to give the enemy the time to stack up some attribute debuffs before you go ahead and drop a load up on them. But let's take a look at this exclusive weapon for her. So Graceful Stab. At level 1, Sword Blast Guardian inflicts Consolidation 2 instead of 1. That is huge. Level 2, Sword Sprint, guaranteed to land a crit, and it deals 20% extra crit damage. Once again, that's huge because Sword Sprint, I want to say, is her passive skill, meaning that additional crit damage means she's just going to heal herself and the ally with the lowest HP, I want to say, even more. Like, that's great. That's great synergy. At level 3, Hexagram Array / her ultimate inflicts feebleness on all enemies for 2 turns before dealing damage, which feebleness makes them take more damage, obviously, when damage is dealt. So pretty good, especially considering that she's a supporter here. And of course, I got to go over here to the preview because I don't have her. And as always, I'll kind of leave her whole equipment recommendation / artifact recommendation up in here too. And with her especially, I'm thinking it's kind of going to be geared more towards the attack / support, I want to say, for her emblems. Maybe defense, maybe attack and defense, but I definitely want to kind of focus on attack for her emblems, because she already has a skill, if you get her exclusive weapons enough, where she's guaranteed a crit, and a lot of her skills is based off the damage that she deals in order to heal the squad, as kind of like the icing on the cake here. So making sure that she can do damage, number 1, but also survive, is a interesting kind of duo there. So just keep that in mind. You know, I'm just kind of trying to throw out stuff from the dome as I talk about this, but this is a regular skill, and we see that Sword Sprint and also the passive over there healing her, which is nice. And then her second skill, which we have to select that, baby girl, Consolidation, and then the resistance debuff is up. So once again, I said it before, this is a skill you kind of want to start off with if you can, because if she can act first on your squad, or basically first before the enemy, especially in a PvP situation, well, you can kind of mitigate getting debuffs on your squad and also kind of mitigate damage on them, and then obviously kind of stalling out here, maybe doing another basic attack or 2 until everyone gets buffed up. You want to go ahead and drop this move right here, take away all those freaking buffs, heal the entire squad, and also nerf their turn meter. But that's pretty much Melina in a nutshell here. I don't think she's going to be a campaign carry for anyone. She has an interesting kit, and her kit does synergize well, especially if you use other supporters like Wim, who can kind of keep his shield up, making sure the whole squad is kind of, you know, in a more defensive state, while Melina's over here acting as more so as, you know, like a passive healer / additional damage mitigator. But that's pretty much it for Melina, you guys. If you do have her, feel free to leave in the comments below where you guys use her at. And in terms of the Tower of Mark, obviously you can kind of possibly use her as a healer-ish of sorts, but she's more so of a DPS / passive healer supporter hybrid. So she doesn't do any one job in particular super duper amazing. But once again, if you're kind of going up against attribute buffs, this is the baby girl for you. You know, in retrospective, I'm like, why does Elena even exist if we have Melina? Why? But yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, see ya.